Alright folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rewind, coming to you with episode 19 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Geo, we're introducing another writer from the future that we shouldn't have happening, and I gotta be honest, I don't feel the same way about him that I do Shinobi. I really like Shinobi and I like the overall concept. Admittedly, this is an interesting concept for a future writer, but it's just not gelling with me. That might be different for some of you who watch this episode, but I'm just not buying Quiz the way some other people might. Now right before we get into introducing Quiz, we should actually talk about the fact that now we've got White Woes here in the mix, and he's now actually taking over for the narration here at the beginning of the show, showing that he's got more involvement in what's going on and the proceedings leading up to the day of Oma. Now at this point, noticeably over the episode, we're seeing that Black Woes is quite a bit shook when it comes to anything relating to White Woes, because now he doesn't have any of the power that White Woes has. To go ahead and start off our episode, we do see that Geo and Gates respond to an attack from another writer, which is another Quiz. Now we are, because of that, very quickly introduced to Kamen Rider Quiz himself. Now, going over the suit, this is another kit bash, meaning these are parts of suits that we've seen before, but they're put together in a different combination. Now, from the neck down, it's clearly an Exade base suit, but the helmet is actually the base of Ghost's mask that we've seen from that series. They just added on the question mark. Now we'll go ahead and go over his motif before I actually get into the actor and the character. So as far as the character goes, Kamen Rider Quiz is based off the idea of getting things right or wrong based off a question, and the way you'll hear that in Japanese is the difference between Maru, which is the check mark, and Batsu, which is the X, or getting it wrong. Now some people have translated that as yes or no, or true or false. These are kind of okay, but really it's the idea of the sound that it makes. Maru makes that bing noise, and Batsu is usually the X that you'll see. If you ever hear about punishment games or Batsu games, that's what it's referring to. So every time that the writers are questioned and they get something wrong, you hear the and they're punished for it. That's carrying over from that tradition over in Japan. Now besides his design, his overall motif, just like Shinobi, is very fleshed out. He has a definitive transformation, he has a definitive kick, he has a definitive style, and I do appreciate that about the character. Now we do see early on from this episode that Ora was the one who went ahead and made another Quiz come into existence, and she goes ahead and saves him for later. So this is just round one of that fight against another Quiz. Now again, Black Woes is trying to impress upon Sogo just how dire the situation is. Basically, if another Quiz and another Shinobi, all of these other things from the alternate timeline keep occurring and keep coming into existence, this will essentially erase his timeline, which nobody seems to be considering here. Could also erase Gates and Tsukuyomi, since they're from that future too. Now we're seeing here over the last few episodes that Gates is trying to avoid being enticed by White Woes and his offers of power, and the idea that he's actually going to be the one to defeat Oma Geo on the day of Oma. So far Gates is doing pretty well with that, but we do see that Tsukuyomi, the one thing that she does do well in this episode is convince White Woes to just further the plot along and make sure everybody can meet. So once everybody is brought together over at the uncle's place, we are introduced to Quiz's civilian form, which is Doan Mondo. Now he's played by another Super Sentai alumni, which is Katsuhiro Suzuki, who previously played Red Buster over on Tokume Sentai Go Busters. Now there is a pun there in his given name. Mondo is like Mondai, which means question, so that's another pun. They do like to put their puns in with the naming of their writer characters. Now we do see that he's from the year 2040, and he's been brought back here by White Woes to go ahead and take on another Quiz for a very personal reason, which he gets into more detail about later on in the episode. Now we spend a little bit of time with him interacting with Sogo and Gates. Gates doesn't really like him, and Sogo's just trying to get along with him like he has with all the other writers, but for the most part we kind of just gloss over that and get to the point where we need to have another fight with another Quiz. Now I know that we're trying to get through this episode and we're trying to give us development and plot here, but a lot of it just feels like it's just filler for the actual fights, and that's kind of a demerit on the overall episode as a whole. Now one thing we do get in that second fight, basically round 2 versus another Quiz, is a new insert song from the people who are actually acting in the show. Specifically, this song is called Future Guardian, and it's sung by Gates' actor. Now it's not very often that the actors sing along and provide their own insert songs into the series. We can think of a few over the last few years. We know Eiji from O's provided his own, and Decade provided one for his series, but overall usually we have other artists coming in, like say Writer Chips, or some of the people who make up bands for the show that provide the insert themes. And of course, let's not forget the Kamen Rider Girls. Now I do want to comment that 2 episodes back there was another insert theme that I kind of missed, but that was due to the audio balancing. We couldn't really hear it all that well, which is kind of the same thing that happened in Kiva with their first insert theme. The audio wasn't really balanced that well, so the next episode they really upped the audio on the song, that way you could hear Destiny's play, and here that's not exactly the case with Sogo's song. I didn't even realize that until I had to go look it up. Now here in that second fight, it's not a very involved fight as far as technicality goes. Any form change that Gates is using, we've seen by this point, and Sogo, he's trying to use the Decade Ride Watch and the Tajator combo to use a new form there in Decade form, but unfortunately we can't see him use any of the powers because then there's another bit of interference from Ora. Now there's an interesting thing as far as Ora is concerned, because now that she's starting to interfere, she's getting blowback directly from White Woz. See, White Woz is being a lot more hands-on as far as making sure that his future comes to pass, and if he has to hurt one of the Time Jackers to do it, he seems to be absolutely fine with that, which makes him different from, say, Gates or Geo, where they're not actually directly attacking the Time Jackers. Now to go ahead and talk about White Woz here, his idea is that he's trying to teach Gates a lesson by making him make very tough, almost diabolical decisions, but I don't quite see how that evens out here. Now this all ties into the reason for Mondo coming back from 2040, because we see that another quiz here in 2019 is actually his father. We see that he's come back into the past to go ahead and learn about just exactly who his father is, because apparently in his timeline, his father died early on, but he was kind of very cruel to his mother who had some sort of terminal illness. So he's trying to see for himself whether or not that's actually the character of his father. Now for whatever reason, some part of this involves Gates having to make some sort of merciless decision in regard to the two of them, which means that White Woz is pushing him to fight Quiz, but for whatever reason, I'm not getting what exactly makes it so merciless. Yes, if he eliminates another Quiz, potentially that could erase the memories of Quiz, of Mondo from the timeline, but that doesn't really seem like a bad thing here. Really, nobody from the Oma timeline should care that much about the alternate timeline. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. We see the beginnings of a fight between Quiz and Gates, and that's actually going to lead us into next week's episode when we see that Geo is actually going to use the double armor from Heisei Generations Forever, and we see that White Woz is going to get another Mirai Watch. So overall, I really wasn't satisfied with this episode. The slow pacing really got to me, and I get it. It's not really a kinetic episode, there's not a lot of forward-moving action, and I guess that has something to do with the idea of Quiz as a whole. Now admittedly, I do like the concept, I do like the overall motif of the writer, but there just wasn't enough bolstering it to make it adaptable to the audience, to make them understand, okay, I get why this guy is important. He just seems like another guy that they had to add. And to that end, because we're starting to focus on Gates and his importance in this alternate timeline, we're starting to see that other characters are starting to suffer, namely Sogo and Tsukuyomi. Really, this was another episode where Sogo was standing around watching stuff happen to him, and Tsukuyomi really only had one thing to do the entire episode. I do think it's interesting, going back to Quiz, that they decided to go ahead and make his belt call out fashion, passion, question. Now of course these all kind of rhyme, but the idea here that they've been combining all of these different motifs together, like breakdancing and samurai back in Gaim, or cars and police work in Drive. So here for Quiz, the idea is potentially fashion and design and questions or question games. I would like to see how that would develop, and maybe he'll get his own spin-off, but as of this video, he hasn't been announced with his own spin-off. So Quiz, we're gonna have to wait a bit longer for you. And of course, all of this is coming together to show that White Woz is actually the real villain at this point. Yeah, it was the Time Jackers, but at a certain point, they're going to understand that White Woz is much more of a threat because he's actually willing to do much more than the other Time Jackers are. He's rivaling Schwartz as far as how far he's willing to go to make sure his future comes to pass. But those, of course, are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Kamen Rider Quiz. Based off this episode, would you like to see a full series of Quiz, or would you rather just leave him alone? Secondly, Tsukuyomi and Sogo. Do you think that because of the writing in this episode, they were kind of shafted as far as their importance in the episode and the overall plot? And third, in regard to the insert songs, do you prefer that the actors are actually coming in and singing their own insert songs, or do you prefer that other bands like Rider Chips or the Kamen Rider Girls sing the insert songs for the show? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 19 of Rider Rewind for episode 19 of Kamen Rider Geo, the Quiz Shock 2040. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.